The woman with dirt under her fingernails and holes in her boots arrived in McGill, Nevada on a Tuesday afternoon in July 1882, carrying everything she owned in a canvas sack that weighed less than 10 pounds. Beatrice Grant had walked the last 17 miles after the wagon driver who had given her a ride decided her lack of coin meant she could provide payment in other ways. And when she refused, he left her on the side of the dusty road without a second glance. She was 22 years old, alone, and had exactly $3.40 to her name, which would not even cover a week's rent in the cheapest boarding house. McGill was a mining town, nestled in the high desert of eastern Nevada where copper veins ran deep and men came seeking fortune. The summer heat was relentless, turning the air thick and shimmering above the rocky ground. Beatrice walked down the main street with her head held high despite the exhaustion that made her legs tremble. She had brown hair that had once been carefully pinned, but now hung in a loose braid down her back, and green eyes that had seen too much loss in too short a time. 6 months ago, she had been living in Sacramento with her parents and younger brother. Then the fever came, swift and merciless, taking all 3 of them within 2 weeks. The landlord had wasted no time claiming everything of value to cover back rent, leaving Beatrice with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate need to go somewhere, anywhere, that did not remind her of everything she had lost. She stopped in front of the general store, reading the help wanted sign in the window. The store owner, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism when she inquired about the position. "I need someone strong," he said, crossing his arms. "Someone who can lift supply crates and work from dawn until dusk. You look like a strong wind would blow you over." "I am stronger than I look," Beatrice said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I can work harder than anyone you will find. I just need a chance." Mr. Henderson shook his head. "I have 3 men coming in tomorrow to interview. Come back in a week if the position is still open." She knew it would not be. Beatrice thanked him anyway and continued down the street, asking at the saloon, the hotel, the restaurant, and every other establishment that might need help. The answers were all the same: too frail looking, no experience, no references. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Beatrice had been rejected by every potential employer in town. She used 20 cents of her precious funds to buy a loaf of bread and a small piece of cheese from a street vendor. As darkness fell, she faced the reality of her situation. She could not afford even one night in a boarding house, let alone the week's advance rent they required. The town had no charitable organizations, no church offering sanctuary. She was entirely on her own. Beatrice walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scrubland dotted with sagebrush and Joshua trees. She found a spot behind a large outcropping of rocks that would provide some shelter from view and laid out her extra dress as a blanket. The ground was hard and still warm from the day's heat. She lay down, using her canvas sack as a pillow, and looked up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. They were so bright here, away from city lights, scattered across the heavens like diamonds on velvet. Despite her exhaustion and fear, she found them beautiful. She did not sleep well that first night. Every sound made her start awake, afraid of rattlesnakes or scorpions or worse, men who might mean her harm. But nothing disturbed her except a jackrabbit that bounded past in the moonlight, and when dawn came, she rose stiff and sore but determined. Nathan Holbrook noticed the woman at the creek on his way into town that second morning. He had ridden out before sunrise from the ranch where he worked, needing to pick up supplies and a new bridle that the saddler had been repairing. Nathan was 26 years old, tall and lean with dark hair and blue eyes that seemed to see more than most people. He had been working as a ranch hand for the past 8 years, ever since he left his family's farm in Missouri seeking something he could not quite name. He had found hard work, good horses, and a kind of peace in the vast emptiness of the Nevada territory. But he had not found whatever it was that made a place feel like home. The woman was kneeling beside the creek that ran along the northern edge of town, washing her face and hands in the cold water. Even from a distance, Nathan could see she was trying to make herself presentable, smoothing her hair and brushing dust from her dress. There was something about the careful, deliberate way she moved that caught his attention. She was alone, with no horse or wagon in sight, no companion waiting nearby. When she stood and picked up a worn canvas sack, he saw how thin she was, how her dress hung loose on her frame. Nathan guided his horse closer. "Morning, miss." Beatrice turned quickly, her hand going to her chest in surprise. For a moment, fear flashed across her face before she schooled her expression into polite neutrality. "Good morning. You heading into town?" Nathan asked, keeping his voice gentle. He had seen that look before, the wariness of someone who had learned that strangers could mean danger. "Yes, I am looking for work," Beatrice said. She lifted her chin slightly, a gesture of pride that struck Nathan as both admirable and heartbreaking. "There is not much available right now," Nathan said. "I heard the mine is not hiring and most of the businesses in town have full staff." "I will find something," Beatrice said with more confidence than she felt. "I must." Nathan studied her for a long moment. He noticed the holes in her boots, the frayed hem of her dress, the way she held that canvas sack as if it contained treasures instead of what he suspected were her only possessions. "Where are you staying?" The question hung in the air between them. Beatrice considered lying, but something about this cowboy's direct gaze made her think he would see through it. "I have not secured lodging yet." "Yet," Nathan repeated softly. He understood what she was not saying. "My name is Nathan Holbrook. I work at the Three Pines Ranch about 5 miles south of here." "Beatrice Grant," she replied. "I arrived yesterday from California." "Long journey," Nathan said. He made a decision then, one that surprised him with its swiftness. "Miss Grant, I do not want to overstep, but I know the owner of the ranch where I work. Mrs. Patterson is a widow who runs the place with her son. They have been talking about needing help with the housework and cooking. It would not pay much, but it would include room and board. If you are interested, I could introduce you." Hope flared in Beatrice's chest, almost painful in its intensity. "I would be very interested. I can cook and clean. I can work hard. Let me finish my business in town and then we can ride out together," Nathan said. "It will be easier than you walking in this heat. You can ride with me if you do not mind sharing a horse." Beatrice hesitated only a moment before nodding. She was acutely aware that accepting this offer meant putting her trust in a complete stranger, but she was also practical enough to know that her options were severely limited. There was something steady about Nathan Holbrook, something in his quiet manner that made her believe he was honest. "Thank you. That is very kind." Nathan completed his errands quickly, too aware of the woman waiting for him near the general store. He saw how people looked at her, the suspicious glances and whispered comments. Small towns were not kind to strangers, especially women alone with no visible means of support. When he returned, he helped Beatrice up onto his horse, then swung up behind her. She sat stiffly in front of him, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of their position, and Nathan kept his hands carefully on the reins, giving her as much space as possible. As they rode south, Nathan told her about the ranch. "Mrs. Patterson's husband died 3 years ago. Heart gave out. She has a son, James, who is about 19 now. Good kid, works hard. They run about 200 head of cattle and breed horses. There are 4 ranch hands including me. The previous housekeeper left 2 months ago to get married, and Mrs. Patterson has been managing on her own, but it has been difficult. What is she like? Beatrice asked. Fair, Nathan said immediately. Tough but fair. She expects hard work, but she treats her employees well. She will give you a chance if I vouch for you. Why would you vouch for me? Beatrice asked, turning her head slightly to look at him. You do not know anything about me. Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. I know you are far from home with nothing and nobody. I know you are trying to make your own way honestly. That is enough. Something in Beatrice's chest loosened at those words. She had felt so alone, so adrift, and this stranger's simple kindness threatened to break through the protective wall she had built around her emotions. She blinked hard against the sudden sting of tears and forced herself to speak steadily. Thank you, Mr. Holbrook. Nathan, he said. Just Nathan. The Three Pines Ranch was larger than Beatrice had expected, with a main house built of wood and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings, and corrals where horses grazed in the midday sun. Mrs. Patterson came out onto the porch when she heard them approach, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a woman in her late 40s with gray, streaked brown hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Nathan dismounted and helped Beatrice down, then made introductions. Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Beatrice Grant. She just arrived in town from California and is looking for work. I thought she might be a good fit for the housekeeper position. Mrs. Patterson looked Beatrice over with the same assessing gaze Mr. Henderson had used, but there was less dismissal in it. Can you cook? Yes, madam. My mother taught me. I can make bread, stews, roasts, pies. I can manage a kitchen. Can you do laundry? Yes, madam. Mending and sewing? Yes, madam. Mrs. Patterson crossed her arms. Why did you leave California? Beatrice had prepared herself for this question. My parents and brother died of fever 6 months ago. I had no other family there and no means to support myself. I decided to try for a fresh start somewhere new. There was a flicker of something in Mrs. Patterson's eyes, sympathy perhaps, or understanding. That is hard. I am sorry for your loss. She paused, then seemed to come to a decision. I can offer you $40 a month plus room and board. You would have a small room off the kitchen. You would be responsible for cooking 3 meals a day for the ranch hands, keeping the main house clean, doing laundry, and any other household tasks I need done. The work is hard and the days are long. I expect reliability and discretion. I do not tolerate gossip or laziness. Are those terms acceptable? $40 a month was more than Beatrice had dared hope for. With room and board included, she could actually save money, start building a future. Yes, madam, very acceptable. When would you like me to start? Today, if you are willing. I have been making do with help from my son, but he has ranch work to attend to. Nathan can show you to your room, and then I will walk you through your duties. Just like that, Beatrice had a job and a place to live. The relief was so overwhelming she felt dizzy with it. Nathan caught her elbow, steadying her, and she realized she must have swayed on her feet. Thank you, she whispered to him. I do not know how to repay this kindness. No repayment needed, Nathan said quietly. Just glad it worked out. The room off the kitchen was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out toward the eastern mountains. It was the first space that had been truly hers in 6 months, and Beatrice stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking it in. She set her canvas sack on the bed and unpacked her few belongings. One extra dress, a nightgown, undergarments, a hairbrush, a small leather-bound book of poetry that had been her mother's, and a silver locket containing tiny portraits of her parents. Everything she had left of her old life fit in a single drawer. Mrs. Patterson proved to be a demanding but not unreasonable employer. She showed Beatrice where everything was kept, explained the routine of the household, and introduced her to the ranch hands when they came in for the midday meal. Besides Nathan, there was old Pete, a grizzled man in his 60s who had been working ranches since before Beatrice was born. Carlos, a quiet Mexican man in his 30s with a wife and children in town. And Tommy, a freckled 20-year-old who could not seem to stop grinning when he looked at Beatrice. James Patterson was a younger version of his mother, serious and hardworking, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. That first meal Beatrice prepared was simple: beef stew with vegetables, fresh bread, and dried apple pie. She worked quickly and efficiently, her hands remembering skills her mother had taught her years ago. When the men came in and sat at the long table in the dining room, she served them with her head down, avoiding eye contact. But she heard their compliments, the surprised pleasure in their voices when they tasted food that was hot and well-seasoned and plentiful. Nathan looked up at her when she refilled his coffee, and their eyes met for just a moment. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that made his whole face soften, and Beatrice found herself smiling back before she could think better of it. "Excellent stew, Miss Grant," he said. "Thank you, Nathan," she replied, then caught herself. "I mean Mr. Holbrook." "Nathan is fine," he said, and something in his tone made it feel like a gift, this permission to use his first name, to treat him as something more than just another ranch hand. The days fell into a rhythm. Beatrice rose before dawn to start the fire in the kitchen stove and prepare breakfast. After the men ate and headed out for their morning work, she cleaned the main house, washed dishes, started laundry, and began preparations for the midday meal. Afternoons were spent on mending, baking, or any other tasks Mrs. Patterson needed done. Then came supper preparations, serving and cleaning up afterward. By the time she finally climbed into her narrow bed each night, she was exhausted, but it was the good exhaustion of honest work, of earning her keep, of having a purpose. She saw Nathan every day, 3 times a day at meals, and sometimes in passing when he came to the barn or the well near the kitchen. They did not speak much at first, just polite greetings and thank yous, but Beatrice found herself noticing things about him. The way he was always gentle with the horses, how he helped old Pete with the heavier tasks without being asked, the quiet authority he had with the younger ranch hands, teaching without condescension. He read books in the evenings, sitting on the porch of the bunkhouse with a kerosene lamp, and she wondered what stories captured his attention. 2 weeks after Beatrice arrived, a snake got into the chicken coop and killed 3 hens. She discovered the carnage when she went to collect eggs in the morning and stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the blood and feathers. It was foolish, she told herself, to be so affected by dead chickens when she had seen her own family die, but something about the senseless violence of it made her stomach churn. Nathan found her there, still standing motionless. "Miss Grant, Beatrice," she blinked and looked at him. "There is a snake. It killed the chickens." Nathan stepped past her carefully and located the snake coiled in the corner, sluggish and sated from its meal. He dispatched it quickly with a shovel, then gathered the dead hens. "I will dispose of these. You do not need to look." But Beatrice did not move. "I do not know why this bothers me so much. They are just chickens." Nathan set down his burden and turned to face her. "Death is death. It matters, even when it is just chickens." He paused, then added gently, "You have seen too much of it recently." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. She turned away quickly, humiliated by this display of weakness, but Nathan did not leave. Instead, he stood there quietly, giving her space but not abandoning her to her grief. When she finally had control of herself again, she wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." "No, it was not," Nathan said firmly. "You are allowed to feel things, Beatrice. You do not have to be strong every moment of every day." It was the first time anyone had given her permission to grieve, to be something other than stoically composed. The kindness of it almost undid her again, but she managed to nod and thank him before hurrying back to the kitchen. For the rest of that day, she was aware of Nathan's presence in a different way, as if something had shifted between them, some barrier had lowered. August arrived with scorching heat that made the air shimmer and the land feel like an oven. Beatrice had never experienced desert summer before, and the relentlessness of it shocked her. Even the nights brought little relief. She lay in her small room with the window open, trying to catch any hint of breeze, and thought about the stars she had slept under that first night in McGill. She had not been back to town since Nathan brought her to the ranch. She had no reason to go and no money to spend even if she did. One evening, after the supper dishes were washed and put away, Beatrice stepped out the kitchen door to escape the heat of the stove. The sun had set, but the sky still glowed with fading light. She saw Nathan sitting on the corral fence watching the horses. Without thinking about it too much, she walked over to join him. "Mind if I sit?" she asked. Nathan looked surprised but pleased. "Not at all." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a mare and her foal. The foal was playful, racing in circles around its mother, tossing its head. "They seem so free," Beatrice said softly. "They are in their way," Nathan agreed. "Do you ride?" "I used to when I was younger. My father had a horse for a while, but that was years ago. You could learn again if you wanted. Mrs. Patterson would not mind if you rode one of the gentler horses on your time off." Beatrice considered this. "I would like that, though I am not sure when I would have time." "You have Sunday afternoons," Nathan pointed out. "Mrs. Patterson gives everyone time off after the midday meal on Sundays." "I usually use that time to mend my clothes or sleep," Beatrice admitted with a small laugh. Nathan turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. "Maybe one Sunday I could teach you if you wanted." "I would like that," Beatrice said, meeting his gaze. "Thank you, Nathan." The following Sunday, true to his word, Nathan saddled a gentle mare named Daisy and helped Beatrice mount. She was nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the reins, but Nathan walked beside the horse, one hand on the bridle, his voice calm and reassuring. "Just relax. She can feel if you are tense. That is it, nice and easy." They stayed in the corral for the first lesson, Nathan teaching her how to sit properly, how to use her legs to guide the horse, how to hold the reins with confidence but not force. Beatrice found herself laughing when Daisy ignored her tentative commands, and Nathan had to intervene. "She knows you are uncertain," he said, grinning. "You have to be more firm, not mean, just clear about what you want." By the end of the hour, Beatrice was walking Daisy around the corral independently, and the sense of accomplishment was intoxicating. When Nathan helped her dismount, his hands on her waist, she was acutely aware of the strength in his grip, the way he made sure she was steady before letting go. "You did well," he said. "Natural rider." "I had a good teacher," Beatrice replied, and the smile they shared felt like something precious, something to be protected. The riding lessons became a Sunday tradition. Each week, Beatrice's skills improved. Soon she was confident enough to ride beyond the corral, and Nathan took her on gentle trails through the scrubland, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about the area. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his parents' farm and his two sisters. He told her about coming west at 18, about the freedom and loneliness of it, about finding work at the Three Pines and learning that sometimes home was not where you came from but where you chose to be. Beatrice told him about her childhood in Sacramento, about her father who had been a clerk and her mother who had made their small house feel warm and safe. She told him about her brother, just 15 when he died, who had loved books and wanted to be a teacher. She told him about the fever, about watching them slip away one by one, about the guilt of being the only one who survived. Nathan listened without judgment, without offering empty platitudes, and somehow that made it easier to speak. September brought cooler temperatures and the first hints that summer would not last forever. Beatrice had been at the ranch for 2 months, and she had saved nearly all her wages, keeping the money in a small cloth bag hidden in her drawer. She was not sure what she was saving for, only that having money meant having options, and options meant safety. Mrs. Patterson seemed pleased with her work. The household ran smoothly, the meals were good, and Beatrice had proven herself reliable and hardworking. Tommy had finally stopped staring at her with puppy dog eyes after Nathan had a quiet word with him. Carlos brought her vegetables from his wife's garden. Old Pete taught her how to make coffee strong enough to wake the dead. James treated her with polite respect. And Nathan had become something that felt dangerously close to a friend. It was dangerous because Beatrice was beginning to feel things she knew she should not feel. She noticed when Nathan came in from working outside, his shirt damp with sweat and his hat pushed back. She found excuses to linger when he stayed behind after meals to talk. She lay awake at night thinking about the way he looked at her, the gentleness in his hands when he helped her mount her horse, the sound of his laugh when she said something that amused him. She was falling for him, and she did not know what to do about it. Nathan was having the same struggle. He had noticed Beatrice that first morning at the creek, but he had not expected to care about her so much, so quickly. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. It was her quiet strength, the way she faced each day with determination despite everything she had lost. It was her kindness to the other ranch hands, the way she snuck extra food to old Pete, because she noticed he had a sweet tooth. It was her laughter, rare but genuine, that made him want to do foolish things just to hear it again. He was falling for her, and he knew it was complicated because they worked together, because she depended on this job for her survival, because he had nothing to offer her except a ranch hand's wages and an uncertain future. The first Saturday of October, Mrs. Patterson told Beatrice she needed to go into town for supplies and asked if she wanted to come along. Beatrice had not been back to McGill since the day she arrived, and she was curious to see it again, to measure how much her circumstances had changed. She sat beside Mrs. Patterson on the wagon seat, watching the familiar landscape roll past. Town was busy, full of miners and cowboys and families doing their weekly shopping. Mrs. Patterson handled her business efficiently, and Beatrice helped load the supplies into the wagon. As they were finishing, a well-dressed woman approached them. She was perhaps 30, with blonde hair arranged in an elaborate style and a dress that probably cost more than Beatrice made in 3 months. "Mrs. Patterson," the woman said with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "How lovely to see you, Mrs. Winters," Mrs. Patterson replied with polite coolness. "I hope you are well." "Oh, quite well. I see you finally found someone to help with the housework. Your new girl is very—" Mrs. Winters paused, looking Beatrice up and down, serviceable. Beatrice felt her face flush with humiliation, but Mrs. Patterson's expression turned icy. "Miss Grant is my housekeeper and an excellent one. Now, if you will excuse us, we have a long drive back to the ranch." As they climbed onto the wagon, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, Do not pay any attention to Helen Winters. She is a miserable woman who makes herself feel important by being cruel to others." "Why does she dislike you?" Beatrice asked. Mrs. Patterson snapped the reins and the horses started forward. "Because 25 years ago we were both interested in the same man. He chose me. She has never forgiven me for it, even though she married someone else and was widowed and remarried again. Some people feed on resentment like it is food and water." Beatrice thought about that on the ride home. She thought about how easily circumstances could change a life, how many paths might be open or closed by single decisions, by luck, by chance. If her family had not gotten sick, she would still be in Sacramento, probably married to the shopkeeper's son who had been courting her. She would never have come to Nevada, never met Nathan, never known what it felt like to sit beside him on a horse and feel completely safe. That night, there was a dance in town to celebrate the end of the harvest season. Tommy and James wanted to go, and they convinced Nathan and Carlos to join them. Beatrice heard them making plans at supper and felt a pang of something she recognized as loneliness. She had nowhere to go, no pretty dress to wear even if she did. She would spend the evening as she spent most evenings, alone in her room, reading by lamplight until exhaustion claimed her. But as the men were leaving, Nathan hesitated by the kitchen door. "Beatrice, would you want to come with us?" She looked up in surprise from the dishes she was washing. "To the dance? Yes, I know you have been working hard. You deserve some fun." Beatrice glanced down at her plain work dress, at her hands red from hot water and lye soap. "I do not have anything appropriate to wear." "You look fine," Nathan said, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe he meant it. "Come with us, please." Something reckless stirred in Beatrice's chest. "All right, let me just change quickly." She put on her better dress, the one she saved for Sundays, and brushed her hair until it shone, then pinned it up in a simple style. When she emerged from her room, Nathan was waiting, and the look on his face when he saw her made her feel beautiful for the first time in months. They rode into town together, Beatrice sitting in front of Nathan on his horse again, and this time she let herself relax against him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her back. The dance was held in the community hall, a large wooden building at the center of town. Music spilled out into the street, fiddles and guitars and a piano, playing lively tunes that made people's feet tap even before they entered. Inside, the hall was crowded and hot, full of miners and ranchers and their families. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting golden light over the swirling dancers. Beatrice had not been to a dance since before her family died, and the joy in the room felt foreign and wonderful all at once. Nathan did not dance with anyone else. He stayed by Beatrice's side, bringing her cups of punch, introducing her to people he knew. When a waltz began, he held out his hand. "May I?" Beatrice's mouth went dry. "I am not a very good dancer." "Neither am I," Nathan said with a grin. "We will muddle through together." She placed her hand in his and let him lead her onto the floor. His arm went around her waist, and they began to move to the music. Beatrice stumbled at first, trying to remember the steps, but Nathan held her steady. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, and she did, relaxing into the rhythm, letting him guide her through the turns. They did not speak while they danced. There was no need for words. Beatrice looked up at Nathan's face, at the concentration in his expression as he navigated them through the crowded floor, and felt something inside her shift and settle into place. She had been so careful to protect herself, to not let anyone get too close, but Nathan had slipped past her defenses without even trying. She cared about him, more than cared. The realization was terrifying and thrilling all at once. When the waltz ended, Nathan did not immediately let her go. They stood there for a moment, his hand still on her waist, her hand still in his, and the noise of the hall faded away until there was only the two of them. "Beatrice," he said softly, and there was a question in his voice, in his eyes, something he was asking without words. Before she could respond, Tommy appeared at Nathan's elbow, asking Beatrice if she would dance the next song with him. The spell broke, and Beatrice stepped back, flustered. She danced with Tommy, and then with James, and then with several other men who asked, but her eyes kept finding Nathan across the room. He was watching her, and every time their gazes met, she felt that same pull, that same sense of inevitability. On the ride home, Nathan seemed quieter than usual. Beatrice wanted to say something, to acknowledge what had passed between them on the dance floor, but she did not know how to begin. They were almost back at the ranch when Nathan finally spoke. "Beatrice, I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered in her chest. "Yes. I know this might not be appropriate, given that we work together, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable or put your job at risk, but I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel what I feel." He paused, and she felt him take a deep breath. "I care about you, more than I should, probably. And if there is any chance that you might feel the same way, I would like to court you properly." Beatrice twisted in the saddle to look at him, and in the moonlight she could see the vulnerability in his face, the fear that she might reject him. "Nathan, I do feel the same way. I have for a while now. I just did not think I should say anything." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was pure joy. "Really, really," Beatrice confirmed, and then she was laughing, giddy with relief and happiness. "I was so worried you only thought of me as a friend." "I have not thought of you as just a friend since the day I met you," Nathan admitted. "I tried to, but it was impossible." They rode the rest of the way in perfect contentment, and when they reached the ranch, Nathan helped her down from the horse and held her hands in his for a long moment. "I will do this right," he promised. "I will talk to Mrs. Patterson, make sure she knows my intentions are honorable. I will not do anything that could jeopardize your position here." "I trust you," Beatrice said simply, and meant it. The next morning, Nathan requested a private word with Mrs. Patterson before breakfast. He explained the situation honestly, telling her that he had feelings for Beatrice and wanted permission to court her. Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption, then fixed him with a stern look. "I will say this once, Nathan Holbrook. Beatrice is under my protection while she works in this house. If you hurt her, if you treat her with anything less than complete respect, you will answer to me. Is that understood?" "Yes, madam," Nathan said seriously. "I would never hurt her, I promise you that, Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "I have seen the way you look at each other. I am not blind. As long as your relationship does not interfere with either of your work, and as long as it is what Beatrice truly wants, I have no objection. But she must tell me herself that she is agreeable to this." Beatrice, when Mrs. Patterson asked her privately later that morning, confirmed that she welcomed Nathan's attention and appreciated Mrs. Patterson's concern. "He is a good man," Beatrice said quietly. "The best man I have ever known." "He is," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "But you take your time, girl. There is no rush. You have been through a lot of loss. Make sure you are ready before you give your heart away." It was wise advice, but Beatrice suspected it was too late for caution. Her heart was already given, whether she was ready or not. October turned the high desert landscape gold and rust. The heat of summer faded into cool, crisp days and cold nights. Nathan and Beatrice's courtship unfolded in stolen moments and quiet conversations. They sat together on the porch after supper, talking about everything and nothing. They rode out on Sunday afternoons, venturing further from the ranch, and Nathan showed her a hidden canyon where the walls were painted with ancient handprints and strange symbols. They held hands when no one was watching and stole brief, precious kisses that left Beatrice breathless and wanting more. Nathan had never felt this way about anyone. Beatrice was strong and gentle and brave, and he wanted to build a life with her. But he was a ranch hand with little money and no land of his own. What could he offer her? How could he ask her to bind her future to his when he could barely afford to take care of himself, let alone a wife? The question plagued him as November arrived, and the first true cold came with it. He lay in his bunk at night, listening to old Pete snore and Tommy mumble in his sleep, and tried to figure out how to make it work. He had been saving his wages for years, not spending much beyond essentials. He had enough to buy a small piece of land, maybe, if he could find something affordable. But land without a house was just dirt and rocks. Beatrice deserved better than a tent or a lean-to. Then one night in mid-November, the temperature dropped sharply. Frost covered the ground in the morning, and Mrs. Patterson mentioned that the almanac predicted an early winter. Snow could come any time now. The thought struck Nathan like a lightning bolt. Beatrice had no place of her own. She was dependent on this job, on the kindness of Mrs. Patterson. If anything happened, if the ranch fell on hard times, or if Mrs. Patterson decided she no longer needed a housekeeper, Beatrice would be back to sleeping under the stars like she had that first night in McGill. The thought was intolerable. Nathan made a decision. He would build Beatrice a cabin. It would take all his savings and every spare moment of his time, but he would do it. She would have a home of her own, a place that could never be taken from her. And when it was finished, when he could offer her something real and solid, he would ask her to marry him. The next morning, he rode into town and spoke with the land office. There was a parcel of land available, 40 acres about 3 miles from the Three Pines Ranch, near a small creek that ran year-round. The land was not prime grazing territory, too rocky and uneven, but it was beautiful in its way, with stands of piñon pine and juniper, and it was cheap. Nathan bought it with most of his savings, then went to the lumber yard and the general store, pricing materials. He could not afford to buy everything at once, but he could start. He could work on it every moment he was not needed at the ranch, and he could have it finished by first snow if he worked fast enough. Nathan did not tell Beatrice what he was doing. He wanted it to be a surprise, a gift, proof that he could take care of her. He told Mrs. Patterson, though, because he would need time away from the ranch to work on the cabin. Mrs. Patterson listened to his plan with an unreadable expression, then nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Nathan. She is lucky to have you. Take the time you need, but be careful you do not work yourself to death. I need you back in one piece." "Yes, madam," Nathan said. "Thank you." He started immediately. Every afternoon after the ranch work was done, Nathan rode to his land and worked until dark. He cleared the site he had chosen for the cabin, a level spot near the creek with a view of the mountains. He hauled rocks for the foundation, cut timber, measured and planned. It was back-breaking work, made harder by the cold that increased each day, but he pushed through the exhaustion. Beatrice noticed that Nathan seemed distracted, that he disappeared after supper instead of sitting with her on the porch. She worried that he was having second thoughts about their relationship, that maybe he had realized courting her was a mistake. When she asked him if something was wrong, he smiled and kissed her forehead and told her everything was fine. He just had a project he was working on. He would explain soon, he promised. She tried to be patient, but the doubt gnawed at her. They had been so happy, and now he seemed distant. She threw herself into her work, cooking elaborate meals, cleaning the house until it shone, anything to keep her mind occupied. 2 weeks into November, the first snow flurries came. They did not stick, just melted as soon as they touched the ground, but they were a warning. Winter was coming. Nathan worked even harder, racing against time. He had the foundation laid and the frame up. The walls were going up board by board. He worked by lantern light when darkness came too soon, his hands numb with cold, his body aching. Old Pete figured out what Nathan was doing and volunteered to help on his day off. Then Carlos joined them, and even young Tommy showed up one Sunday with his tools. They did not ask questions, just worked alongside Nathan in companionable silence. With their help, the cabin took shape faster. It was simple, just one room with a loft for sleeping, a stone fireplace and 2 windows, but it was solid and well built. Beatrice found out the truth by accident. She needed to deliver a message to old Pete and went to the bunkhouse to find him. Tommy was there, complaining cheerfully about how sore his arms were from helping Nathan with his cabin. Beatrice froze in the doorway. "Cabin?" she asked. "What cabin?" Tommy's eyes went wide as he realized his mistake. "Oh, I thought you knew. Nathan has been building a cabin out on his land." "We have been helping him." "His land," Beatrice repeated faintly. Old Pete gave Tommy a disgusted look. "You have got the biggest mouth in Nevada, boy." He turned to Beatrice with more gentleness. "Nathan bought some land a few weeks ago. He has been working himself near to death building a cabin on it. I think he was planning to surprise you." Beatrice did not know what to feel. Surprise, certainly, but also confusion and a strange hurt that Nathan had kept this from her. She thanked them and left, her mind spinning. Why would Nathan build a cabin without telling her? What did it mean she found out that evening when Nathan returned to the ranch, just as she was finishing the supper dishes? He looked exhausted, his face drawn, his hands bandaged where blisters had formed and broken. Beatrice took one look at him and felt her heart crack open with love and fear and a dozen other emotions she could not name. "Nathan, you should have told me," she said quietly. He stiffened. "Tommy told you." "Yes." Beatrice dried her hands on her apron and turned to face him fully. "Why did you not tell me yourself?" Nathan ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear in his gesture. "Because I wanted it to be a surprise. I wanted to have something real to offer you before I asked." "Asked what?" Beatrice's heart was pounding. "Asked you to marry me," Nathan said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know we have not been courting long, and I know I am just a ranch hand with nothing much to my name, but I love you, Beatrice. I have loved you since the day I saw you washing your face in that creek, trying so hard to be brave when you had every reason to give up. I want to build a life with you. I want to give you a home that is yours, that no one can ever take from you. I wanted to finish the cabin before I asked, so you could see that I am serious, that I can take care of you." Tears streamed down Beatrice's face, and she could not have stopped them if she tried. "Nathan, you foolish, wonderful man, I do not need a cabin to know you love me. I already know. I have known for weeks. But you deserve a home," Nathan insisted. "You deserve security and safety. I want to give you that." "You already have," Beatrice said, closing the distance between them and taking his bandaged hands in hers. "You gave me that the day you brought me here, the day you vouched for me to Mrs. Patterson. You gave me that every time you sat with me on the porch, every time you taught me to ride, every time you made me laugh when I felt like I would never be happy again. The cabin is beautiful, Nathan, but it is not the cabin that makes a home. You are my home." Nathan stared at her, and she saw the moment her words truly reached him, the moment he understood that she was not impressed by grand gestures or material things. She loved him for who he was, not what he could give her. "Does that mean you will marry me?" "Yes," Beatrice said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, of course I will marry you." Nathan pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it was nothing like the chaste, brief kisses they had shared before. This was deep and full of promise, a kiss that sealed their future together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "I want to finish the cabin before the snow comes. I want us to have our own place, somewhere we can start our life together." "Then I will help you," Beatrice said firmly. "We will finish it together." Mrs. Patterson gave Beatrice time off to help with the cabin, on the condition that she kept up with her essential duties. Beatrice rose even earlier than usual, prepared meals in advance, and then rode out to the cabin site with Nathan. She had never built anything in her life, but she learned. She helped mix mortar for the stone fireplace. She held boards steady while Nathan nailed them in place. She chinked the gaps between the logs with mud and moss. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but she had never felt so purposeful, so alive. The cabin came together in a flurry of activity. The other ranch hands helped whenever they could. Mrs. Patterson sent supplies and even came out one day to inspect their progress. She walked through the cabin, examining the sturdy walls and the well-built fireplace, and nodded approvingly. "You two have done good work. This will be a fine home." The third week of November brought darker skies, and a bitter wind that promised snow was imminent. Nathan worked frantically to finish the roof, to get the door and windows properly installed. Beatrice sewed curtains from fabric Mrs. Patterson gave her and made a quilt from scraps. They had almost no furniture yet, just a bed frame Nathan had built and a small table with 2 chairs, but it did not matter. It was theirs. The cabin was finished on a Tuesday, 5 days before Thanksgiving. Nathan hammered the last shingle into place on the roof as the first fat snowflakes began to fall from the leaden sky. He climbed down the ladder and pulled Beatrice into a tight embrace. "We made it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Before first snow." Beatrice tilted her face up to the sky, feeling the cold kiss of snowflakes on her cheeks. She thought about that night in July when she had slept under the stars with nothing and no one, when she had been so scared and alone. And now, just 4 months later, she was standing in front of her own home in the arms of the man she loved, watching snow fall like a blessing. "We made it," she agreed, and kissed him as the snow began to fall faster, covering the land in white. They were married the following Sunday in a simple ceremony at the ranch. There was no fancy church or elaborate celebration, just the ranch hands and Mrs. Patterson and James, and a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through McGill. Beatrice wore her best dress with wildflowers in her hair that Nathan had somehow found despite the cold. Nathan wore his cleanest shirt and a new vest that old Pete had lent him. They spoke their vows standing in front of the fireplace in Mrs. Patterson's parlor, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Beatrice with such tenderness that Mrs. Patterson had to wipe tears from her eyes. The wedding feast was simple but joyful. Beatrice had prepared as much as she could in advance: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh bread, and a cake that was slightly lopsided but tasted delicious. There were toasts and laughter and music when Tommy pulled out his harmonica, and old Pete revealed he could play the spoons. They danced in the ranch house parlor, and this time when Nathan held Beatrice in his arms, it was as his wife. As the sun began to set, Nathan and Beatrice said their goodbyes and rode to their cabin through the snowy landscape. Nathan had been there earlier to light the fire in the fireplace, and when they entered, the small room was warm and glowing. They had so little, but it felt like abundance. That night they lay together in their bed in the loft, listening to the wind outside and the crackle of the fire below. Beatrice rested her head on Nathan's chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Nathan replied, his arms tightening around her. "I will spend every day of my life making sure you know it." Winter settled over the Nevada high desert with a cold, clean beauty. Snow covered the ground and ice formed on the creek, but inside the cabin, Nathan and Beatrice were warm. They fell into the rhythms of married life, learning each other in small, intimate ways. Nathan still worked at the Three Pines Ranch, but Beatrice no longer lived there. Mrs. Patterson had hired a new housekeeper, an older woman named Mrs. Brennan, and while Beatrice sometimes missed the bustle of the ranch house, she loved the quiet privacy of her own home. She kept the cabin spotless, cooked meals that filled the small space with delicious smells, and worked on small projects to make their home more comfortable. She sewed more curtains, braided a rug from fabric scraps, carved spoons from wood Nathan brought her. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, Nathan reading aloud from books he borrowed from Mrs. Patterson's library while Beatrice mended or knitted. They made love in their loft bed, learning the geography of each other's bodies, discovering what brought pleasure and joy. Beatrice had been nervous the first time, her knowledge limited to whispered conversations with married friends and her mother's vague warnings. But Nathan was patient and gentle, and what could have been awkward or frightening became beautiful. Christmas came, and they spent it at the ranch with the other hands. Mrs. Patterson gave them a set of real china plates as a gift, something fine and lovely that made Beatrice cry with gratitude. Nathan gave Beatrice a small locket on a chain, and inside he had placed a tiny sketch he had drawn of their cabin. Beatrice gave Nathan a shirt she had sewn herself, using fabric she had bought with her saved wages, and a journal bound in leather where he could write down his thoughts. January and February were hard months. The snow was deep, and the cold was brutal. There were days when Nathan could barely make it to the ranch and back. They burned through their supply of firewood faster than expected, and Nathan spent every spare moment chopping more, his hands raw and bleeding from the work. Food was scarce and expensive. They ate simple meals of beans and rice, and whatever meat Nathan could hunt. There were moments when Beatrice wondered if they would make it through the winter, if this life they were trying to build was too fragile to survive. But they did survive. They survived because they had each other, because they were too stubborn to give up, because the love between them was stronger than the cold and the hunger and the fear. On the worst days, when the wind howled and the snow piled against the cabin door, they held each other close and weathered the storm together. Spring came slowly, reluctantly. The snow began to melt in March, revealing the brown land beneath. The creek swelled with runoff, and the first green shoots appeared in sheltered places. Nathan plowed a small garden plot near the cabin, and Beatrice planted seeds: beans, squash, carrots, potatoes. She tended them carefully, and as the weather warmed, they began to grow. In April, Beatrice realized she had not bled in 2 months. She waited another week to be sure, then told Nathan over breakfast one morning, "I think I might be with child." Nathan's fork clattered to his plate. He stared at her, his eyes wide. "Really? I think so. I am not certain yet, but all the signs are there." Beatrice felt nervous suddenly, unsure of his reaction. They had not talked about children, not specifically. Did he want them? Was it too soon? But then Nathan was out of his chair and pulling her into his arms, laughing with pure joy. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." He pulled back to look at her, his face radiant. "Are you happy? Is this what you want?" "Yes," Beatrice said, her own smile growing. "Yes, I want this. I want a family with you." Nathan kissed her, then dropped to his knees and pressed his face to her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your father, and I already love you more than I thought possible." Beatrice ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with emotion. She had lost so much, but she had found so much more. She had found love and home and purpose, and now she was going to bring a new life into the world. The pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice was sick in the mornings, exhausted all the time, and as her belly grew, simple tasks became difficult. But Nathan was attentive and caring, taking over the heavier chores, making sure she rested, bringing her flowers and little treats from town. Mrs. Patterson gave her advice, and old baby clothes that James had worn. The wives of the other ranch hands visited, bringing casseroles and wisdom and stories of their own pregnancies. Summer came, hot and bright. The garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables. Nathan built a small barn for the horse and the milk cow they had purchased. He talked about expanding, about buying more land, about building a future for their child. Beatrice listened to his dreams and added her own, and together they imagined the life they would create. In September, as the leaves began to turn gold again and the air grew cool, Beatrice went into labor. It was long and painful and terrifying. Mrs. Patterson came to help, along with Mrs. Brennan, who had experience as a midwife. Nathan waited outside, pacing frantically, until finally, hours later, he heard the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the cabin, her face weary but smiling. "You have a son, Nathan. A healthy, beautiful son, and Beatrice is fine. Tired, but fine." Nathan rushed inside and found Beatrice propped up in their bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale with exhaustion, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Nathan, look at him. He is perfect." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed and carefully took the baby from her arms. The infant was red-faced and wrinkled, with a cap of dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers that wrapped around Nathan's thumb. "He is so small," Nathan breathed. "So perfect." They named him Samuel, after Beatrice's father. Samuel Grant Holbrook, born September 15, 1883, in a cabin his father had built, to parents who loved him with every fiber of their being. The first years of Samuel's life were a blur of sleepless nights and endless work. Beatrice learned to nurse, to soothe a crying baby, to manage a household with an infant demanding constant attention. Nathan worked even harder, driven by the need to provide for his growing family. They were exhausted and stressed and happier than they had ever been. Samuel was a good baby, curious and cheerful. He began to smile at 6 weeks, to laugh at 3 months. By the time he was a year old, he was walking, getting into everything, his chubby hands reaching for whatever caught his attention. Nathan built him a small wooden horse that he dragged everywhere. Beatrice sewed him clothes and sang him songs her mother had sung to her. In the summer of 1884, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time she was less nervous, more confident. She knew what to expect, knew her body could do this. Their second child, a daughter they named Lily Rose, was born in March of 1885. She was smaller than Samuel had been, with her mother's green eyes and a quiet disposition that was the opposite of her brother's boisterous energy. The cabin that had seemed adequate for 2 now felt cramped with 4. Nathan began work on an addition, 2 more rooms and a proper kitchen. It took the better part of a year, working in his spare time, but he completed it with help from the ranch hands who had become like family. The expanded cabin was comfortable and sturdy, a real home. Life settled into a new rhythm. Nathan continued to work at the 3 Pines Ranch, but he also began breeding horses on their own land, using skills he had learned over the years. The horse trade was profitable, and slowly their financial situation improved. They were not wealthy, not by any means, but they had enough. They had food on the table, clothes on their backs, and a roof over their heads. They had each other and their children. They had built something real and lasting. Years passed. Samuel grew tall and strong, inheriting his father's build and his mother's determination. Lily was quieter, more thoughtful, with a love of books and learning. In 1888, Beatrice gave birth to another son, Thomas, and in 1891, another daughter, Anna. The cabin expanded again, and the land that had seemed like such a gamble when Nathan first bought it became a thriving small ranch. Mrs. Patterson eventually retired, turning the 3 Pines over to James, who ran it with the same fairness his mother had. Nathan became the ranch foreman, a position of respect and authority. Beatrice became known in the area as an excellent cook and a generous neighbor, always ready to help families in need. The children grew and thrived. Samuel learned ranching from his father and became a skilled horseman. Lily attended the school that had been established in McGill and stunned everyone with her intelligence. Thomas was the family charmer, able to talk his way out of any trouble. Anna was fearless, climbing trees and racing horses, and refusing to be told what girls could and could not do. Through it all, Nathan and Beatrice remained devoted to each other. They had their disagreements, certainly. There were tense conversations about money, about discipline for the children, about whether they should expand the ranch or stay small. But they always worked through it, always came back to the love that had brought them together in the first place. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Beatrice back to the spot where he had first seen her, by the creek on the edge of McGill. The town had grown over the years, more buildings and more people, but this spot was unchanged. "I think about that day all the time," Nathan said, holding her hand as they watched the water flow past. "I think about how close I came to not stopping, to just riding on by. What would have happened if I had not noticed you?" "Someone else would have helped me," Beatrice said, but they both knew that was not necessarily true. She might have ended up in a much worse situation. She might not have survived. "I am grateful every day that I saw you," Nathan said seriously. "You changed my life, Beatrice. You made me better than I ever thought I could be." "You saved me," Beatrice replied, turning to face him. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me a home and a family and a reason to keep going. I love you more now than I did the day we married." "And I love you more than I did yesterday," Nathan said, pulling her close. "And I will love you even more tomorrow." They kissed there by the creek, 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life from nothing, who had survived and thrived because they refused to give up. The years continued to pass. Samuel married a girl from town, a blacksmith's daughter named Rebecca, and they built a cabin on the far edge of the Holbrook land. Lily went to college in California, an almost unheard of achievement for a girl from a small Nevada town, and became a teacher. Thomas apprenticed with a carpenter and discovered a talent for building. Anna, true to form, refused all attempts to marry her off and announced she was going to breed horses better than anyone in the state. Nathan and Beatrice became grandparents. Samuel and Rebecca had 3 children. Lily eventually married a professor and had 2 daughters. The cabin that Nathan had built in the fall of 1882, racing against the coming snow, became the heart of a growing family, a place where everyone gathered for holidays and celebrations. Nathan's hair turned gray, and Beatrice's face gained lines, but they grew old together gracefully. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold, holding hands like they had when they were young. They told their grandchildren stories about the old days, about how their grandmother had arrived in McGill with nothing, and how their grandfather had built this cabin with his own 2 hands. "Tell us again how you met," the grandchildren would beg, and Nathan and Beatrice would exchange a smile, the kind of smile that spoke of decades of shared life and begin the story once more. On a cool evening in October 1912, 30 years after Nathan had hammered the last shingle onto the cabin roof, Beatrice and Nathan sat on their porch wrapped in quilts. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the promise of winter. Their children and grandchildren had just left after a boisterous Sunday dinner, and the house felt quiet in their absence. "You remember that first snow?" Beatrice asked, leaning her head on Nathan's shoulder. "Every detail," Nathan replied. "I remember thinking I had never seen anything more beautiful than you standing there with snowflakes in your hair. I remember thinking I had never been so happy," Beatrice said softly. "I had lost everything, but I found you, and that made it all worthwhile." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "We built a good life, did we not? The best life," Beatrice agreed. "I would not change a single thing." They sat there as darkness fell and the stars emerged, the same stars Beatrice had slept under that first desperate night in Nevada. But she was not alone under those stars now. She had Nathan beside her, a home around her, a family that stretched across the land. She had everything she had ever needed, everything she had ever wanted. "I love you," Nathan said, as he did every night. "I love you too," Beatrice replied, as she had every night for 30 years. And in the cabin that Nathan had built before the first snow, surrounded by memories and love and the life they had created together, they sat and watched the stars. Two people who had found each other when they needed it most, who had built something beautiful and lasting, who had proven that love and determination could overcome anything. The cabin stood solid and strong, a testament to Nathan's promise and Beatrice's faith. It had sheltered them through harsh winters and hot summers. It had been filled with the cries of newborn babies and the laughter of children. It had been witness to their arguments and their reconciliations, their joys and their sorrows. It was more than wood and stone. It was home. Their story was not one of grand adventures or dramatic escapes. It was the story of two ordinary people who found each other, who chose each other every day, who built a life one board and nail at a time. It was the story of a woman who had slept under the stars because she had no roof, and a cowboy who built her a cabin before the first snow. It was a story of love, and in the end, that was the only story that mattered. As the years continued to unfold, Nathan and Beatrice remained the anchor of their family. When difficult times came, as they inevitably did, their children and grandchildren looked to them for guidance. When the economy faltered, when droughts threatened the ranch, when illness struck, Nathan and Beatrice faced each challenge with the same determination that had carried them through those early desperate days. In 1916, the world was changing rapidly. Automobiles were becoming more common, even in rural Nevada. The war in Europe seemed far away but cast a shadow nonetheless. Samuel's oldest son, Nathan's grandson, talked about enlisting, about serving his country. The thought terrified Beatrice, but she understood. The world their grandchildren were inheriting was different from the one she and Nathan had known, but some things remained constant. The land endured. The cabin stood strong. And every evening, Nathan and Beatrice sat together, their love as steady as the mountains on the horizon. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1921, at the age of 65. He had been working in the garden that afternoon, planting vegetables alongside Beatrice, and they had laughed about something Samuel had said. That night he kissed Beatrice goodnight, told her he loved her, and simply did not wake up. The doctor said his heart had given out, that it had been quick and painless. Beatrice was devastated. They had been married for 38 years, together for 39. He was woven into every part of her life, and his absence left a hole that nothing could fill. Her children wanted her to move in with one of them, worried about her living alone, but Beatrice refused. "This cabin is my home," she told them. "Your father built it for me. I will not leave it." She lived in the cabin for another 12 years, tending her garden, welcoming her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, keeping Nathan's memory alive through stories. She told them about the young cowboy who had stopped to help a desperate woman at a creek. She told them about the waltz they had shared at the town dance. She told them about the cabin going up board by board, about the race against the first snow. Beatrice died in 1933 at the age of 73, sitting in the rocking chair Nathan had made for her 40th birthday. She had been looking out the window at the mountains, a peaceful expression on her face. Her children found her there, and they knew she had gone to join Nathan, the man she had loved for more than half a century. The cabin remained in the family. Samuel and Rebecca's oldest son moved in with his wife, and they raised their children there. The cabin was expanded again over the years, modernized with electricity and plumbing, but the original room that Nathan had built remained unchanged. It became a family shrine of sorts, preserved as it had been, with the stone fireplace Nathan had mortared and the wooden beams he had hewn. Descendants of Nathan and Beatrice Holbrook still lived on that land decades later, still told the story of how it all began. They pointed to the creek where Nathan had first seen Beatrice, to the site where she had slept under the stars. They showed visitors the cabin, explaining how Nathan had built it by hand, determined to give the woman he loved a home before winter came. It became a family legend, a love story passed down through generations. And every time it was told, the listeners understood that they were hearing something important, something that transcended the specific details of time and place. They were hearing a story about love and determination, about two people who refused to give up, who built something lasting out of hope and hard work. The cabin Nathan built stood for more than 100 years, a monument to a promise kept, to a love that endured beyond death. And on winter nights, when snow fell soft and thick, covering the land in white silence, it was easy to imagine Nathan and Beatrice there still, sitting by the fire, holding hands, watching the stars through the window. She had slept under stars because she had no roof. He had built her a cabin before the first snow, and together they had built a love that would outlast them both, a legacy that would continue for generations, proof that even in the harsh wilderness of the Wild West, even when all seemed lost, love could triumph. Love could build. Love could endure. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a promise fulfilled. Beatrice had come to Nevada with nothing and found everything. Nathan had been searching for home and discovered it was not a place but a person. Together, they had created something beautiful and true, something that would be remembered and celebrated long after they were gone. And in the end, that was all anyone could hope for. To love and be loved, to build something lasting, to leave the world a little better than they found it. Nathan and Beatrice Holbrook had done all of that and more. Their cabin stood as proof, solid and strong, a testament to the power of love and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The story of the woman who slept under stars and the cowboy who built her a cabin was not just their story. It was a story for everyone who had ever felt lost, everyone who had ever needed help, everyone who had ever dared to hope that tomorrow could be better than today. It was a story that reminded people that kindness mattered, that love was real, that determination could overcome any obstacle. And so the story lived on, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling but always maintaining its essential truth. That on a summer morning in 1882, a cowboy named Nathan Holbrook saw a woman named Beatrice Grant by a creek, and that moment changed both their lives forever. From that single act of kindness, a family grew, a legacy was built, and a love story for the ages began. The cabin still stands, weathered but strong, a reminder that the best things in life are built with patience, determination, and love. And every time the first snow falls in the Nevada high desert, people remember the story of Nathan and Beatrice, of the cabin built before winter, of the love that warmed them through the coldest nights. Their story is complete. Their love endures. And the cabin Nathan built for Beatrice remains, a testament to a promise kept, a love honored, a life well lived. In the end, they had everything that mattered: each other, a family, a home. They had built their own piece of heaven on earth, one board and nail at a time, and no amount of hardship or sorrow could diminish what they had created. This is the story of She Slept Under Stars Because She Had No Roof, and the cowboy built her a cabin by first snow. It is a story of the Wild West, of survival and determination, but most of all, it is a love story. And like all great love stories, it reminds us of what truly matters, of what endures, of what makes life worth living. Nathan and Beatrice lived, loved, built, and created a legacy that stretched far beyond their own lives. And that, in the end, is the greatest achievement any person can hope for. To love so completely, so truly, that the effects ripple outward through time, touching lives yet to be born, inspiring hope in hearts yet to beat. The cabin stands. The story endures. And love, true love, never dies.